Why, hello. I've decided I am butting into discourse. However, this is much different from the discourse I have butted in before. Because I'm talking about movie discourse. I guess it gets kind of political, but not really. But I've been seeing all this stuff about panic attacks in movies, specifically people praising an accurate representation of a panic attack in movies, and it's led to a lot of backlash because now that it's been done, it keeps being done. And as of right now, do I understand why it's getting backlash? Not really. I get that it's kind of cringy. However, I'm still of the opinion that having a portrayal of a panic attack or any type of mental illness that's accurate and not harmful is good. But I'm gonna do a deep dive to see what exactly the points people are making. So I just wanted to film this knowing nothing because I felt like that would make it a little more interesting if I just start out being but I like that scene in Puss in Boots. Because I don't really know what the hell everyone else is talking about because that's the only thing that I've seen. But then I've been seeing more stuff on the timeline, so I'm gonna talk about that. And we're gonna analyze what's going on here. Why are people mad about panic attacks? Why are people excited about panic attacks? And why can't people be normal? So I'm a person who suffers pretty bad anxiety. Sometimes I have trouble getting out of the house. I have really bad social anxiety, so a lot of the times I'll be in public and I just kind of shut down. And I just get quiet and I don't talk. But I've also had moments where I'm having trouble breathing, nearly in tears. There's a few different types of panic attacks I've experienced. The main ones being shutting down, getting really quiet, not really saying anything the rest of the day, and then me kind of getting riled up and crying and hyperventilating and feeling like the world is ending. That's kind of what it feels like. Your heart races. That's more similar to what was happening in the Puss in Boots thing, where he kind of just spirals and then just lays down, his heart's pounding and he's hyperventilating. As he has the perrito, I got my gatitos here. Sorry, my Spanish is not great. They definitely helped me a lot. So I nearly cried at that scene because I'm oh my god, been there. Also, my little babies help me out so much when I'm feeling anxious and sad and my world is my life is about to end. It was just relatable, and I thought, past the panic attack scene, that movie's just wonderful in general. I cried multiple times. I could get into why I love that movie. So this discourse started with an announcement from the popular Twitter account at Discussing Film, where they announced that the Spider-Verse, series will be releasing a short film where Miles has a panic attack. Apparently it's supposed to be him confronting his feelings of anxiety. Now, I can't say too much about this because this isn't out yet. But people were mad that what happened in Puss in Boots led to this. I don't really understand why still, but I think all of this is going to depend on how it's used. I don't think them putting this in movies is inherently a bad thing. As I explained, Puss in Boots does a really good job at utilizing the panic attack as a tool and development of his character. So I think it's all going to depend how it's used. If it really means anything, or if it's kind of just treating it as purely something that is dramatic. Since anxiety is such a normal thing that a lot of people experience, I think it definitely can be a useful plot tool, especially for characters who are more fantasy, I guess, like a superhero or some fairy tale character. It does add something meaningful because, people view them as heroes that are fearless and invincible, when it kind of brings to people that even these characters have moments where they are weak or they are afraid, and that's a good thing. Okay, so the original tweet where the person was talking about Puss in Boots being an accurate portrayal of a panic attack was quote tweeting a scene from Velma where her heart is beating out of her chest. And, I don't know the context of the show, and I don't really care to, because I think I've heard all I've needed to about this show. But the scene is pretty stupid, obviously. It seems like they're utilizing the panic attack as, like, that being the way that the monsters get her in the show. That's what it looks like to me.
That's perfect! One more time should do it. Make it super cringy!
And then basically Shaggy, who is called something else in this show, I don't know what, but he's called something else. He talks her down by, like, admitting that he has a crush on her.
That's not true. I like you. Like you.
And that's because she's like, I'm ugly and no one likes me.
Why? I'm weird and no one likes me!
And that's the reason why she's having a panic attack, which I guess happens, but, like, I feel like you don't have a panic attack because of those feelings. You have a panic attack, and that's why you have those feelings. It's when you overthink and you spiral into thinking those things. I don't know why that's, like, all she said, but he talks her down by making her laugh because he admits that he has feelings for her.
Okay, stop. I'm peeing.
And then that's it. So kind of like a dumb plot device, and I think that's a very accurate thing to criticize because that is pretty fucking stupid and doesn't portray panic attacks as very real things. Like, you could just talk someone out of it by saying that you have a crush on them. Like, if this show was actually respected, that would literally lead to so many dudes thinking they could, like, fuck a girl out of having a panic attack. Because I've already met men who are like, I like it when girls cry because it's easier to console them and then, like, bone them. It's pretty gross, and I really hate how that's, like, a thing that's portrayed in a show. But I'm glad that this isn't taken seriously, because it shouldn't be. I just finished watching the movie again, and I am crying a little bit. Again, this is the third time I've watched this movie, and I'm crying again. I guess while I'm emotional. Oh man, you can see you can see the glistening. Oh my god. I'll get myself together. Just thought that was a little funny. I'm gonna get into a bit of, this movie, why this movie is so good. I wanted to do a review of this movie, but I felt like it would kind of be out of place, so I felt the panic attack discourse would make it a little more exciting. So let me just rant about why this movie is so good. Obviously, the first thing you notice about this movie is that it's, like, insanely gorgeous. The animation, the art style, it's beautiful. The contents of it are also amazing. Like, it's a great story and has great characters. But the art style does add to the emotion in the movie, which I really appreciate. Izzy, I can't see. Now, as a massive fan of Shrek growing up, it's really cool to see a spin-off that is, like, as good, maybe even better than Shrek. That's, like, not a thing that happens a lot. In a way, the way I feel about this movie is kind of similar to Better Call Saul in that when watching the original Shreks, even though Puss in Boots doesn't show up until Shrek 2, which is funny because Saul shows up in Breaking Bad Season 2, both Saul and Puss's characters didn't really captivate me in the original stories. That's definitely an unpopular opinion with Saul for sure. I don't know about with Puss, but I just felt like their characters in the original ones maybe weren't as fleshed out or as interesting or as likable as a lot of the other characters, and I think that was done purposefully, which is fine. I really love Better Call Saul. It was a really good show, and it's probably gonna be one I mention to, like, my kids one day, but it definitely doesn't top Breaking Bad for me. I don't know, I'm a Breaking Bad stan, so I don't think anything could really beat that out. However, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish might beat out how I feel about Shrek. I might have to let it sit for a little longer, but because I was a mere sperm when Shrek came out, so it has the nostalgia value for me. I grew up on it since I was a baby. But now I'm a 20-year-old geeking out about a kid's movie. But I couldn't be more happy about it. Because unlike millennials, I am thrilled that kids have great movies to grow up with. I don't want to see animation decline. I want there to be quality kids movies because I feel like that's such an important, impactful part of, a childhood and your development and your emotions and interests. It's great to see. What it does around the panic attacks is, I've noticed that most of the discourse is around the panic attack scene in general, and I think the problem that people are pointing out is that there's way too much focus on just that one panic attack scene, which is kind of just a minor portion of Puss's full character development, which is fair, and I can explain why. It's kind of not correct to just single out that scene because there's a whole build-up and release afterwards that make that scene what it is. It's the character arc of him fully breaking and then coming back better. He comes out of it better. That's his breaking point. That's the peak in conflict and inner conflict and character development. That's what makes that scene so good. Also that it's like very accurate to what a normal panic attack feels like, but it's used as such a clever plot device, and I think that should be talked about more than it just only being kind of a good representation of what having a panic attack is like. So the beginning of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is maybe one of the best establishments of a character that I've seen, and I didn't think that at first. But looking back and watching it back, this was a perfect way to establish an egotistical, self-centered character. On first watch, I was like, they're starting this movie with a song. His ass is not singing right now.
Who is your favorite fearless hero?
But I think the purpose of it was to be corny. It was establishing him as a self-centered, cringy, egotistical, cocky hero that we all know and love. It does it on purpose. And it's kind of camp. Because the way that the crowd reacts is just like dramatic and adds to kind of like this fantastical fantasy that's in Puss's head about himself. And also, I didn't notice this until my friends pointed it out, but he is pretending to play the guitar. He is not actually playing the guitar at all. And you notice at a point that he's playing it completely out of tune, which is a really funny touch. I think that's really cool. This eventually, I'm not gonna like go point to plot point. If you haven't seen it, you should, so I'm not gonna explain the whole plot. But he gets in an epic battle with this huge rock beast. I don't know if that's a fairy tale or not, but he beats the rock guy, but then the bell that's attached to the rock guy crushes him and he dies. It kills him. So then he wakes up and he's at the doctor's office, who is like this quirky, like medieval vibe doctor, which I think is a really funny choice because he even brings out like leeches. He's very like medieval medicine, and I like that. I thought that was a really funny touch. But he's analyzing which life he's on, and this is maybe one of my favorite scenes where he's describing each time he died, and it ends with like a little card with the number of which life it is. I just think it's like it's one, funny, but also two, very well animated. It establishes the plot pretty well because, this is his last life. That's like the basis of his whole adventure. So this leads to him immediately denying it, being like, I laugh at the face of death. He's cocky, he denies it. At the doctor and then at the bar, they establish the motif of a candle being blown out, which is a really cool touch because, like blowing out candles is like making a wish. And they also mention birthday wishes later in the movie. So I just thought that was like clever. So at the bar, we get established to maybe the most creepy villain I've seen in a while, both like in a kid's movie and in movies in general. Spoiler alert, he's literally death. Like he is death. So he has this like creepy whistling noise and red eyes and is in a hood. He's a wolf. He's just really freaky. I think making a villain this scary was so perfect for a character like Puss in Boots because he is able to accomplish what, character development Puss needed to go through. He humbles his ass. His life flashes before his eyes. This is where we see his first moment of panic. This is the first moment where Puss feels afraid and he runs away. This is a theme for him. He doesn't know how to deal with fear. He runs away from fear anytime he is scared instead of just facing it. The way panic attacks are used in this movie is so good because it's showing how even, the most brave hero can still get them sometimes. And there are points where panic attacks and anxiety is extremely consuming and can affect your life. But, at the end of the day, anxiety is a normal human emotion and we're all going to feel it at some point. And the anxiety isn't just a tool to represent accurate, mental illness and problems that a person might run into, but it's a tool to expand the depth of an otherwise shallow character, which is why it's so good. So then he ends up at Mama Luna's house, where he meets the comic relief character, who's this scruffy dog, who we later called Perrito. Excuse my Spanish once again. But he's a positive mindset shawty. He's always like, you gotta think positively. This easily could have been very annoying. I thought it was going to be, but this is like one of the best comic relief characters I've seen in a long time. I don't think ever in my life a comic relief character has been able to say a line that gives me chills, but this movie did that probably multiple times. There are multiple points in this movie where I feel chills because of how impactful and adorable a lot of these lines are. And then we're also introduced to Goldilocks and the three bears who are looking for Puss, who are kind of established as another antagonist, but not in the same. All the villains are kind of different in how they are antagonists. They're more like competitors in terms of them being antagonists. They're competing to get the wish rather than just trying to kill Puss straight up. Goldilocks is voiced by Florence Pugh, which I didn't know that until I looked into it, but she did a pretty good job. And Goldilocks and the Three Bears are pretty endearing and do have a moment that makes me cry, even though they are British. So I do have to fall back on my values for this one. So this is where Puss learns about the wishing star because Goldilocks was trying to recruit him to help him get there, and that's where he gets the idea to try to get his lives back. But then they learn they have to steal from Big Jack Horner, who is another villain who has his own type of vibe, villainy aspect he brings to the movie, which I think might be my favorite. I feel like that might be a bit unpopular, but I like Death, and he is very creepy, but just what they did with Jack Horner, I think was honestly hilarious. I like a good hilarious cunty villain. He's very cunty. He's got the bob that swishes. I love a good queer-coded villain. It's my favorite. So no matter how good the evil menacing man is with sharp teeth, I'm gonna root for the cunty queer-coded villain because I just love bitches who are gay and evil. So he's just incredibly annoying and exists purely to be annoying. But his point is basically being a fairy tale memorabilia fanboy. He's a collector. He collects Cinderella's shoe, magic wands, Jiminy Cricket. He collects all of those things like they're Funko Pops. That's basically what he does. And he's voiced by John Mulaney. And to be honest, I don't really know the most about that guy. But every time he does voice acting, I'm okay, he slays at voice acting, and I think he should stick with that. Personally, I haven't been too sold on his stand-up stuff, so personally, I think the guy should do more voice acting because he does very well. So this ends up leading to the big brawl where they're traveling through the map. There's a bit of exhibition, back and forth between Puss, Kitty. Oh, did I mention Kitty? We also meet Kitty Softpaws when we're stealing the map from Jack Horner, who is Puss's ex who he left at the altar. I love Kitty. I do love Kitty. For the sake of me getting to the point of this video, I'm not going to describe what happens there, but they basically run into Jack Horner again once they're kind of like a third of the way up the map, and they have a big intense battle between Kitty, Puss, Perito, and Jack Horner and the Baker's Dozen. They have like an intense battle, and Jack Horner basically just lets all of his people die. He doesn't really care about collateral damage. He just like is like, I don't care who lives or dies as long as I get my wish. He's kind of like, I think he's more evil than death, honestly. Just the purple hair makes him seem like he's not, but I think he is. But then as they're fighting, we hear the whistling, and you're like, oh fuck, it's death. Like, he's coming to get him again. And this is what triggers the famous panic attack scene that everyone talks about. So you hear the whistling, and you see Puss just freeze, and the hair, his fur, just starts sticking up. You know how a cat, when they get scared or, try to be intimidating, their hair sticks up. So his hair slowly starts sticking up, and he's like, his eyes are widening. You see him start to panic. This leads him to run off. So he's running through the forest. His vision is blurry. He has like tunnel vision, which is definitely very accurate. I've gotten tunnel vision quite a lot from panic attacks because you hyperventilate and it's a lack of oxygen. Like you're struggling to stay aware, and your body's in fight or flight mode, so it tunnels in on what's right in front of you, because that's like a survival reaction. Perito then finds him. He's sitting on a tree with his hand on his chest. You can hear his heart beating, and he's breathing very heavily, and he's trying to talk to Puss and see what's wrong, but Puss is so out of it and freaked out that he can barely talk. He's panting, so he can't talk. And then Perito lays his head on his stomach, and that calms Puss down. You hear his heart rate slow and his breathing slow. And it's just a really sweet scene, because not only is Perito able to calm Puss down, but he also gets Puss to be vulnerable for the first time we see in this movie. He admits that he's scared. He admits what he did wrong to Kitty Softpaws. It's the first breaking point we see lead to a moment of vulnerability and growth in Puss. Though sad and stressful, it is heartwarming to see, an otherwise stiff and egotistical character finally just admit that he's going through it. So another part of the character development is when Puss has a conversation with his past lives, because he ends up in, it's this crystal, I forget what it's called, but it's like the Cave of Reflection or something, and he sees each of his past lives, and he basically talks to them for a bit. They reflect on like how awesome he is. The ego gets boosted again, but they try to convince him to ditch Kitty and Perito because he has the map. He has every opportunity to get the wish on his own, but Puss wants to go back to his friends because he was broken a little, but also he learned to trust people a bit more. He felt connected to friends for the first time in his life. That's completely different from them because they had always worked alone. He tells his past lives off, and then death walks in again for maybe the most menacing entrance and his most menacing moment, because this is the moment where we do find out that he is death.
I'm death, straight up.
This leads to things getting really tense, because not only is Puss like really facing death now, but he also is so scared that he runs past Kitty and Perito, so they think he's deceiving them to get his wish. But then they get to the final battle. This is when everything that's unsettling about this movie is kind of concluded. This is the line that Perito gives that gives me chills. He says,
"Maybe one life is enough."
And in the context of the movie, this was just such like chills, but also I could feel like every muscle in my body just like releasing. It's like every muscle in my body had learned to breathe. Like every part of my body just became lungs. It's such a cute, it's corny, but it's also so cute. And with everything else that happened in the movie, it's just such a like, wow, like this is what it was all for. It was the payoff. It was the payoff, and I love a good payoff. After this, Death shows up one last time where Puss has the final battle where he actually faces Death. He doesn't run away. The battle ends with Puss basically putting up a good fight against Death, and Death seeing that Puss has changed as a person. He's not the egotistical, arrogant kitty that he once was. Figures his last life is one worth living and says, "I'll see you later." This is when I start crying because they end up tearing the map up and they all realize that they didn't need magic to get what they wish for. Goldilocks was going to wish for a real family, but she realized that the relationship she had with the bears was family enough for her and they were everything that she needed. That part definitely made me cry quite a bit. And also the moment between Kitty and Puss made me cry because not only did Puss realize that just one life was worth living, he said that, like, it's worth living with you, and I was like, ah, that's so cute. And also Kitty's wish was someone she could trust, and she realized that Puss had grown as a person and she could trust him, no magic required. It's just so cute. So cute. So with that, you can see that the panic attacks in the movies were a tool to show the growth and the vulnerability of someone who seemed strong and who thought they were invincible. It's a really beautiful message about not only how one life is worth living and how it's okay to be afraid, but that vulnerability and the other people in your life are also meaningful, and you don't need magic to wish for something unachievable to be happy and to have all that you need. Like, I'm literally tearing up thinking about it. That's like such a cute and great message for children and just anyone. It's okay to be afraid. Like, that's beautiful. This movie is just a masterpiece. It's beautiful. It's only an hour 40 minutes, and I like get chills thinking about it. Like, this is a beautiful movie. It's a masterpiece. I'm gonna say I am quite a DreamWorks stan at this point. They keep nailing it. They had a few iffy moments, but they nail it a lot of the time. When they nail it, they really nail it. This is one of those times where this movie is fantastic. It's just so amazing. If animators are considering putting a panic attack in a movie, they gotta think of it less as representation. Not that representation isn't important, but if you just put a panic attack without it making sense, it's kind of just like, why? You didn't really have to do that. So panic attack should be more as a character tool rather than just a thing to create tension. And that's what this movie does very well. There's a meaningful aspect to panic attacks. It's not like this happens and then this happens. It's no, this happens and that leads to this happening, which leads to him spiraling, which leads to this, which leads to this conclusion, which leads to this conversation. It's all connected and it's all meant to build this purpose and this arc that's just truly amazing. Anyways, so that's why Puss in Boots utilized this so well, but people are mentioning they're kind of like overdoing it with other things, and I'll get into that.
This is a certified hood classic.
I know Paw Patrol is meant for like literal babies, but there are multiple things that make this scene not mean as much. I mean, I don't know the full context. I'm not gonna watch the full context. I don't think I need to. One, what a terrible message to tell kids that sometimes even cops freeze up and don't help people.
It's Chase! Something's wrong! He's just standing there!
What kind of propaganda is this? That even sometimes cops are weak too. Sometimes cops are failures too. I mean, that's true, but when it comes to like other people's lives depending on you, you can't just like freeze up. That's kind of like your job to like not do that. I wasn't expecting this kid's dog show to have the most accurate depiction of the police, but it's also just kind of done stupidly because I mean, just freezing up is a panic attack symptom, but you kind of just see him freeze and you don't hear anything about, like, why? Because you just see his foot kind of slip and then the rocks fall, but that's about it. The thing that made Puss be meaningful is that he opened up afterwards, and you could clearly see what led him to spiral. This, he just kind of, like, gets scared and then has a panic attack and then is just sad about it. He feels ashamed. They make it seem like it's a shameful thing that he had a panic attack, froze, and then someone else, like, saved the day. That's basically the lesson here, and it's just not good. So I get the criticism of this one because it is not used as a tool. It is used as a thing that happens that adds basically nothing to the characters or the plots. Now, I don't know if I need to explain, but yeah, this scene in Iron Man is dumb because it does a corny Marvel thing where they have the robot voice. I forget what it's even called. What the fuck is the voice called? I don't care. I'm a Marvel hater, so take this how you will. But it's so Marvel of them to have Iron Man have a panic attack and then need the robot in the suit to explain that he's having a panic attack.
My diagnosis is that you've experienced a severe anxiety attack.
Me?
I guess it's because he's in denial about it, but it just doesn't feel as impactful when you don't have the kind of unspoken action of it. Because in Puss in Boots, they don't need to explain that he's freaking the fuck out because he's clearly freaking the fuck out. In Iron Man, they're like, yeah, he's having a panic attack. In case you didn't know, we'll let you know. So this was a pretty awful way to show a panic attack in a movie because why are you explaining it? Like, this definitely seems more just like just doing it just to build tension rather than it being a useful tool of him as a character, because I can't say there's been any movie with Iron Man that I've seen where it would be useful to show him having a panic attack, because he definitely does not grow as a person basically at all. Maybe for Spider-Man a bit and maybe when he fucking dies, but other than that, I can't really say I see that much character growth of Iron Man as a person. You can fight with me in the comments, I guess, but personally, I don't think Marvel is known for its great character development. So I'm pretty sure the Sonic panic attack scene was brought up as a joke. He's not really having a panic attack, he's just kind of like upset. I still wanted to talk about it because I do love the Sonic movies. I think they're great. And I think this scene is a perfect representation about how not everything needs to be fucking deep. With like the right vibe and time and place, you can just like have a character just be upset. Like, it's just Sonic, he gets upset and goes fast because he's Sonic.
I really am alone.
I think the Sonic movies are perfect for what they are. They're literally just fun movies about a hedgehog who goes really fast. So there really doesn't need to be that much depth in him as a character because Sonic really isn't that much of a flawed character. He's just kind of quirky and fast. The tension can literally just be the bad guys. It's fine. That is a perfectly fine movie, and they're fun to watch. They make sense for what they are. So I think I did want to mention that not all movies have to mean something. I do like when kids' movies have a good message, but sometimes kids just want to watch Sonic go fast. And that's fine. We need movies like that. We need dumb, not necessarily dumb, but we need just fun movies that don't require a lot of thinking. That is fine. And this movie does that perfectly. So that is all I have to say about panic attacks in movies. I wanted to open up this conversation because I've kind of just seen people being trolls on the internet it is funny. I think a lot of the tweets are funny, but I wanted to like really take a deep dive on like if people do have a problem with it, why, and get to the bottom of how it can be utilized the most effectively. And also, I just wanted to know what was going on. And I feel like I have a pretty good understanding now. And I still am of the opinion that the Puss in Boots panic attack was quite good. I mean, he was literally being chased down by death, so makes sense. That is all I have for today. And here is my outro in Spanish. I'm sorry if it's bad. I tried to have a friend help me, so... Gracias por ver el video. Asegúrate a gustar y suscribirse. Recuerda que está bien a tener miedo y que una vida es suficiente. Adiós, amigos.